Your wife is still alive, the black girl said. Nicholas Drayton stopped breathing. The words sliced through the cold wind sweeping over the marble gravesite. He turned, eyes narrowing at the small figure standing just outside the line of mourners. She couldn't have been older than 9. Her hoodie clung to her like damp skin. Rain had soaked her sneakers, but her voice, steady, strange, certain, cut deeper than the storm ever could. I saw her, she added, staring straight through him. She was bleeding. Calling your name, Nicholas's heart dropped. A name he hadn't heard aloud in a year, a name he wasn't ready to believe again. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow the story gets even bigger. The drizzle fell in steady sheets as Nicholas Drayton stared at the polished headstone in front of him. The words etched into the marble were clean, formal, beloved wife, lost at sea, never forgotten. He hadn't cried, not publicly, not once. Not even during the press conferences, the private ceremonies, the endless condolences from people who barely knew her. The billionaire tech magnate had always worn grief like armor, stoic, detached, unreadable, until the voice came. I saw her. Nicholas turned sharply, not because the voice was loud, it was. It was soft, careful, but it struck him like thunder. A young black girl no more than 10 stood a few feet away from the mourners, her soaked hoodie hanging off her tiny frame like a curtain of shadows. Her sneakers were caked in mud, her face streaked with rain, but her eyes, those eyes were too old for her age. Steady, haunted, unshaken, she repeated, your wife, she's alive. His security detail was already moving toward her, but Nicholas raised a hand. The others froze. What did you say? He asked, stepping closer, his voice steel over ice. She didn't die in the storm, the girl replied. She was taken. I saw them drag her from the beach. Nicholas blinked. It had been almost a year since Elena vanished. The yacht had gone down during a freak squall off the Canary Coast. The Coast Guard found debris, blood, even her wedding ring tangled in a fishing net. No survivors. That was the official story. That was the lie he'd learned to live with. But now, in the middle of a rain-slicked cemetery, a child was telling him otherwise. The girl stepped forward, unafraid. She was bleeding. Her hair was short like a boy's. She kept calling your name. His breath caught. Elena had kept her hair cropped after her final round of chemo, refusing to wear wigs. It's not weakness, she used to say. It's war paint. She wore it like armor, like pride. She had a scar, the girl added, tracing her left forearm. Here, from elbow to wrist. Nicholas's jaw clenched. That scar had never been public knowledge. Elena got it in college, protesting a government weapons contract on campus. A pane of greenhouse glass had shattered when she tried to chain herself to a gate. He had wrapped her arm himself. She never told the press, never let it show. He swallowed. Who are you? Malia, the girl said. I've been trying to find you. He looked around. The cemetery had gone quiet. Even the wind held its breath. His assistant stepped forward again. Mr. Drayton, should I? No, Nicholas cut in. Let her speak. They took her in a van, Malia said. Big, black, no plates. I followed it until I couldn't anymore. They stopped near an old shipyard. Nicholas stared at her. He should have dismissed it. Should have called it trauma, imagination, a lie. But something in her tone, too precise, too unafraid, lodged itself in his ribs. She wore a necklace, Malia whispered. Gold, a little heart with 2 letters inside, N and E. He staggered. That necklace had never been photographed. It had never been posted. It was his 10th anniversary gift, custom-made, engraved, held tight against her chest the night she vanished. And now a child with rain-soaked shoes and cracked fingernails was describing it in flawless detail. Malia reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a small handkerchief. It was light blue, frayed at the edges, soaked through, but the embroidery gleamed gold even in the rain. One word, Elena. Nicholas stepped forward, his hand trembling as he took it. Where did you get this? Behind the docks, she said, near the cannery. They stopped there that night. Silence closed in. The wind swept through the cemetery like a shiver. Nicholas turned slowly to his aide. Get the car. So, now. Malia looked up at him as the black SUV rolled to a stop at the edge of the path. Are you taking me somewhere? He opened the door. If you're telling the truth, I need your help. She climbed in without hesitation. As they pulled away, a man in a grey overcoat lowered a pair of binoculars from across the street. He touched a device in his coat and murmured into a hidden earpiece, "Subject has engaged. Initiate phase 2." Inside the SUV, Nicholas sat in silence, staring at the handkerchief. His grip tightened. After everything, the investigations, the private searches, the false leads, he had buried his hope alongside Elena's memory. But now it was clawing its way back, and that terrified him more than grief ever did. Malia sat across from him, her eyes watching the street lights smear against the wet windows. "You believe me now?" she asked quietly. "I believe enough to act," he said. She nodded. "Then you should know something else." He looked at her. "They knew she mattered. That's why they took her, not because she was your wife." He frowned. "Then why?" "She was investigating something, I don't know what, but she had files, papers. I saw them when they pulled her out of the van. She tried to hide them. One of them called her a threat." Nicholas's blood turned cold. Elena had always been more than a CEO's wife. She was a journalist, a whistleblower, a crusader who'd burned bridges for truth. She had been investigating something before her death, something she never shared. He thought it was corruption in the pharmaceutical sector, but now it might have been something much bigger. "Tell me everything," he said. She did. The SUV hummed steadily through the rain as the city blurred past outside. Inside, Nicholas studied the girl across from him. Malia sat quietly, arms tucked into her hoodie, posture tight, but her eyes, clear, sharp, never drifted. He'd seen that kind of focus before, in CEOs preparing for billion-dollar mergers, in soldiers before breaching doors, never in a child. He broke the silence. "You said they called her a threat. What exactly did you hear?" "They didn't say much. Only one guy talked a lot. He had a fake arm, left side, looked real until he moved it. It made this clicking noise." Nicholas froze. A memory stirred. Years ago, his firm had partnered with a defense contractor developing next-gen prosthetics for combat veterans. Only a few prototypes were ever completed, experimental limbs with embedded surveillance tech. He remembered the project being shut down after a security breach. But what if it was? "Did you see his face?" "Kind of white, grey beard, long coat, barked orders like a drill sergeant. He kept saying, 'Package is unstable, move now.'" Nicholas nodded slowly, his pulse hammering in his ears. "And no one else saw this?" "No one sees kids like me," she said, her voice even, "especially black ones living near dumpsters." The honesty stung, not just because it was true, but because it was something Elena had railed against constantly. She wrote editorials about the invisible class, about how entire communities could disappear without a headline. Nicholas leaned forward. "Why did you wait so long to come forward?" Malia looked down at her fingers. "I didn't know who you were at first. I saw your face on a magazine at the library 2 weeks ago, said you'd be speaking at the memorial. That's when I knew, that's when I remembered her saying your name." He took a breath. Every word from her mouth felt like it dragged his heart over broken glass. "You have anywhere to go tonight?" he asked. She shook her head. "I sleep at the harbor sometimes, or behind the museum." "Not tonight," he said. "You're coming with me." Her eyes widened. "You don't even know me." "I know you saw something no one else did," he replied. "That's enough." The SUV curved away from downtown and climbed into the hills. Beyond the fog, lights began to pierce through the trees, the Drayton estate. Iron gates parted automatically, revealing a long driveway lined with manicured hedges and sleek ground lights. Malia leaned forward, staring out the window in awe. "You live here?" He nodded. "Come on, let's get you dry." A housekeeper met them at the door, her face unreadable as Nicholas gestured for her to bring warm clothes and food. "She's with me," he added. "Take care of her." Inside, the house was quiet, glass, stone, and warm walnut. Malia's soaked sneakers squeaked faintly on the polished floor as Nicholas led her to the den. The fireplace crackled to life with the push of a switch. He draped a blanket over the chair and motioned for her to sit. Dinner came fast: grilled cheese, tomato soup, apple slices. She stared at the plate like it was a museum exhibit. "I haven't had hot food in weeks," she whispered. Nicholas sat across from her, still holding the handkerchief she'd given him. "You said you saw a van, you followed it, what else?" She took slow bites as she spoke. "They stopped at the shipyard near Pier 9, the one with the broken cranes. I watched from behind the fence. They carried her inside. She was screaming, not loud, Maury-like begging. She tried to run. The man with the arm, he gave the order. Sedate if necessary, she knows too much." Nicholas felt his gut twist. "And then what?" he asked. "They stayed in there for a while. I left after an hour. I thought, maybe I imagined it. But a few days later I went back. I found this." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small, rectangular object. It looked like a flash drive, only older, bulkier, covered in dirt and rust. She placed it on the table carefully. "I think it fell from the van. It's broken, but maybe it's something." Nicholas picked it up carefully. There were strange symbols etched into the casing, nothing commercial, definitely military or black market. He stood. "I know someone who can look at this." Malia's eyes followed him. "Do you believe me now?" "I believe enough to start a war," he said. An hour later, Nicholas stood in his private study, the drive under a magnifier. On the screen were encrypted partitions, completely scrambled. He called a contact. He said, "It's Nicholas, I need your help." A pause. "You told me you were done," the voice replied, deep and dry. "I was," Nicholas said, "until an hour ago." Silence again. "What's the job?" "Surveillance, Pier 9. Look for signs of military presence, medical personnel, anything with artificial tech. We're looking for someone who wasn't supposed to survive." "Got it," replied. "You stepping into this deep?" "Deep enough to drown again," Nicholas said, and hung up. He looked through the study doors. Malia had fallen asleep on the couch, curled beneath the blanket, shoes off, fingers wrapped around the edge of the pillow like it might disappear. He closed the door gently and turned back to the dark. Elena had always said the truth had a heartbeat, and tonight he heard it again. The next morning, grey light spilled through the glass windows. Nicholas entered the kitchen to find Malia sitting at the edge of the table, eating scrambled eggs and toast with slow, focused bites. She looked smaller in daylight, but not weaker. "You sleep okay?" he asked. "The couch is softer than any bed I've ever had," she replied, not looking up. He poured himself coffee. "I need your help today. I want you to show me exactly where you saw them take her, every step." Her fork froze. "Medea, what if they're still there?" "They won't see us," he said. "We'll be careful." An hour later, they were in a different SUV, windows tinted, moving slowly through the fog-covered streets near the docks. Malia guided him with short, precise instructions, pointing from the back seat. "There, behind that dumpster, that's where I hid." Nicholas looked out. The shipyard loomed beyond the chain-link fence, massive, rusted, and half-abandoned. Cranes leaned like broken giants. Broken pallets and forgotten containers littered the yard. It looked empty. But Nicholas had learned to stop trusting what things looked like. "Wait here," he said. He stepped out, wind biting through his coat. A second SUV parked 2 blocks away. Re-emerged, tall, bearded, built like a retired war god. He wore civilian clothes, but moved like a ghost. "No movement inside," Ree said, "but I found something." They slipped through a side gate and made their way to the far building, one with a sealed loading bay and a new padlock. Inside, it reeked of bleach, metal, and surgical gloves. Ree pulled open a door to a small chamber, bare walls, a rusted cot, metal restraints. A tray of medical tools sat nearby, the syringe still faintly stained. Nicholas stared at it, then his eyes dropped to the wall. Near the cot, scratched into the concrete, a series of letters. "I be Elena Beckett," Ree muttered. "She was here." Nicholas stepped closer, running his fingers over the grooves. They were recent, no more than a month old, a signal, a mark left behind for someone who might come. She didn't stop fighting, he whispered. Ree handed him a blood-streaked scrap of fabric, navy blue silk, embroidered in silver. She wore this scarf at our wedding, Nicholas said. Back at the car, Malia waited. When Nicholas returned, she met his eyes immediately. You were right, he said. She didn't smile, just nodded. She was scared, was she? Yes, he said, but she never gave up. Malia looked down at her hands. Then we don't either. The SUV moved in silence as Nicholas gripped the bloodied scarf, fingers pressing it tight like a lifeline. Malia sat beside him, her face turned to the window, watching the shipyard vanish into the fog behind them. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. The weight of what they'd found was too heavy, too fresh. Finally, Nicholas broke the silence. When you saw them, what direction did the van go after the cannery? She didn't answer right away. East, toward the cliffs. His brow furrowed. That stretch of land led to only a handful of places, old supply depots, decommissioned naval facilities, and private corporate storage hubs. Most were supposed to be dormant, but supposed to be didn't mean anything anymore. I'm going to need to make some calls, he said. But before I do, Malia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. She turned, her expression unreadable. You said earlier that people don't see kids like you. How long have you been living like this? She shrugged. Since I was 7. His stomach turned. No family. Not anymore. He nodded slowly. And the night you saw Alina, you were alone. I was always alone, she replied, no bitterness in her tone, just fact. Nicholas turned toward her. That changes now. She gave him a look, not trusting, not cynical, just cautious hope. Back at the estate, security protocols had already been heightened. Ree's team, now moving in full force, swept the perimeter, rechecked internal cameras, and began cross-referencing data pulled from nearby surveillance towers. Nicholas stood in his study with Malia beside him, the flash drive she found now undergoing digital analysis. What are you expecting to find? She asked, watching as strings of encrypted code unraveled across the screen. A breadcrumb, Nicholas said, or a backdoor, anything that can tell us where they moved her next. Re-entered, tablet in hand. We might already have it. Nicholas crossed the room. Talk to me. There's a relay ping coming from a decommissioned supply depot 2 miles east of the cannery, Ree explained. Minimal activity, no vehicles registered, no corporate logs, but we intercepted a burst of encrypted data 24 hours ago, short-range, military grade. Malia stepped closer, so they moved her there. Possibly, Ree replied, or they're staging from it. Nicholas straightened. We go tonight. I'll get the gear, Ree said. Before he left, Nicholas stopped him. I want someone watching Malia at all times. She raised an eyebrow. I'm not a baby. No, he said, you're a target. You saw something they meant to erase. She hesitated, then nodded. That night they left in a different SUV, blacked out, weapons in tow. Ree drove, Nicholas navigated, and 2 others from the private team followed behind in a second vehicle. Malia remained at the estate under the care of one of Ree's top surveillance techs, a woman named Juno, sharp-eyed and quiet, with a habit of never blinking during a conversation. The depot looked abandoned from a distance, but when they reached a high ridge overlooking it, binoculars told the truth. Movement, 2 men, no uniforms, but armed and standing like soldiers. One of them spoke into an earpiece. Another walked a perimeter route with military precision. Nicholas muttered, they're still hiding something. Ree loaded his sidearm. Want to go in loud? No, Nicholas replied. We go in silent, find a way in, confirm she's there. If we blow this early, they'll move her again. Ree nodded. I've got thermal scans coming in now, 3 bodies inside, 1 stationary. Could be her, Nicholas whispered. They made their way around the building's rear, keeping to the shadows. The air smelled of salt and machine oil. At the far corner, a vent access point had been left half loose. Ree pried it open, and one by one, they slipped inside. The crawl space was tight and stank of rust. Nicholas tried not to think about the last time he'd crawled through something like this: war zones, rebel factories in Moldova, blackout deals in Panama. Never for something this personal, never for someone he'd already buried in his heart. Ree's fiber-optic camera slid through the vent's edge and dropped into the room below. "What do you see?" Nicholas whispered. "Man standing, prosthetic arm." Nicholas's breath caught. "That's him," Ree added. "And the stationary figure. Tied to a chair, blonde, can't see her face, heads down." His heart slammed against his ribs. They exited the vent fast and clean, landing in the shadows behind a series of crates. Ree took out the first guard with a muffled punch and a silenced round. Nicholas moved like a man possessed. He reached the chair, tore the tape from her mouth. "Elena," he whispered. Her head rolled weakly, then her eyes opened. "Tom," she rasped. He almost collapsed. "I've got you," he said, arms wrapping around her, fingers shaking. "You're safe." A sound stopped him cold. Click. He turned. The man with the prosthetic arm stood there, blood on his lip, gun raised. "You don't know what you're doing," the man growled. "I know exactly what I'm doing," Nicholas replied, stepping in front of Elena. "She had evidence," the man snapped. "She wouldn't shut up. They paid me to silence her. She was supposed to drown." Ree moved toward him slowly. "Drop the gun," Nicholas said. Then another voice cut through the darkness. "Drop it first." All three turned. Malia stood in the doorway, holding a heavy flashlight like a weapon, her face stone. "You again," the man snarled. "Stupid little brat." "Then why are you scared of me?" she asked. In the pause, Ree lunged, disarmed him, and knocked him out cold. Nicholas turned to her, stunned. "You could have been killed." "I'm tired of hiding," she replied. They carried Elena out the same way they came. A black van waited nearby. Medics were already inside. As the doors closed, Nicholas gripped Elena's hand. "You're home," he whispered. She coughed, barely audible. "Not all of them. Gone, Ashmont, just part more watching." He leaned in. "We'll find them." Malia stood beside her, holding the sketch she'd drawn, the one of Elena. She offered it silently. Elena looked at it, smiled faintly. Better than any photo. As the van pulled away, Nicholas turned back toward the depot. The dark wasn't empty, not anymore, but it still had secrets. And they were just getting started. The rain hadn't let up when they reached the estate, but inside the walls of the Drayton compound, there was light and life again. Elena lay in the private medical wing, hooked up to oxygen and IV fluids. Her face was pale, bruised, and far thinner than Nicholas remembered, but it was her. Her pulse, though weak, was steady. Every monitor beep was a promise. Malia stood in the doorway, watching silently. "Do you want to come in?" Nicholas asked gently. She nodded and stepped forward. Elena's eyes fluttered open, cloudy but aware. She turned toward the small figure beside the bed. "The girl," she whispered, her voice cracked from dehydration. "I remember you." "I didn't know what to do," Malia said. "I was just a kid." "You were brave," Elena replied. "That's more than most." Nicholas watched the exchange, his chest tight with something he hadn't felt in months: gratitude, not for luck, for this child who had refused to forget. Later that morning, Nicholas joined Ree in the estate study. Files, photographs, satellite prints, and surveillance logs littered the large oak table like a blueprint for war. "What do we know?" Nicholas asked. Ree tapped a screen. "Our man with the prosthetic arm, he's ex-private military, goes by the alias Nolan Creed, off-the-books contract work for multiple black market clients. Vanished off-grid 3 years ago, resurfaced recently as security for offshore operations, some with ties to Ashmont Holdings." Nicholas's expression hardened. "Ashmont's still active." "One of the few shell companies that didn't dissolve after Elena's disappearance," Ree confirmed. And guess where one of their depots sits? Nicholas didn't answer. He already knew. 2 miles from the pier where Malia saw Elena dragged into the van, Ree continued. Nicholas ran a hand through his hair. They never moved far, just deep. Malia entered then, hoodie sleeves rolled to her elbows. I found something, she said. In the drive. One of the names listed in the metadata showed up in a news article last year. A woman named Lyra Bentley, journalist, went missing while covering a story on corruption in Honduras. Elena, sitting weakly on a couch nearby, stiffened. I remember her. She reached out to me, said she had something explosive, then vanished. Nicholas crossed the room. You think she's still alive? I don't know, Malia admitted, but the file says she was seen near an offshore research station off Miami 6 months ago. Nicholas looked at Ree. Can we trace that? Ree nodded. If we go now, we can have boots on the ground by morning. Elena placed a hand on Nicholas's arm. Take Malia, she's part of this now. He turned to the girl. You up for another trip? I told you, she said. I'm not hiding anymore. That afternoon, they flew to Miami under assumed names. Elena stayed behind to recover, though reluctantly, with surveillance tech guarding every room. The station was listed as a climate research facility funded through a non-profit, but when they arrived by chartered catamaran, it looked nothing like a lab. The towers were rusted, windows dark, and guards stood too straight for civilian staff. Nicholas scanned the deck. Nothing about this says science. They docked half a mile away and swam the rest, wetsuits muffling movement, gear waterproofed. Malia moved like she'd done it before, silent, controlled, observant. Nicholas kept close, half in awe, half in fear for her. Inside, the corridors were metallic and cold, faint lights humming overhead. No computers, no scientists, just echoes and steel. Malia moved ahead, holding a salvaged access card from the depot raid. When she pressed it to the scanner, the door clicked open. What they found inside wasn't data, it was people. 8 of them caged behind steel bars in the main chamber. They looked half dead, starving, dazed, eyes full of hollow fear. One woman stepped forward. Gaunt, cropped hair, defiant eyes. Lyra Bentley, Nicholas asked. She stared at him for a beat. Took you long enough. Malia helped her through the corridor while Nicholas and Ree held the rear. But just as they reached the subdeck stairs, an alarm blared. They've spotted us, Ree growled. Move. Gunfire cracked through the halls. Malia ducked, pulling Lyra behind crates. Nicholas returned fire, every bullet echoing through his skull like a war drum. They turned down an access tunnel, tight and narrow, leading back to the dock. The boat was waiting. Juno was at the helm, face calm despite the chaos. As they scrambled aboard, Ree dropped a small black device on the gangplank. Gift, he muttered. The explosion rocked the platform as they sped away, fire tearing through the structure's eastern wing. Back at the safe house, Lyra sat at the table, drinking clean water like it was sacred. She placed a flash drive on the wood between them. This has everything I collected before they grabbed me. Names, ports, shipping routes. You get this in the right hands, they'll never hide again. Why didn't you give it up before? Nicholas asked. Lyra looked at Malia. Because I didn't trust anyone, but your girl, she reminded me of someone who still believed people mattered. Nicholas slipped the drive into a secure pouch. You'll stay here, we'll protect you. No, Lyra said. I want to speak. On camera, I want them to know I survived. Malia watched her with wide eyes. You're really going to go public? Lyra nodded. It's time. That night the story broke. Lyra Bentley, missing journalist, thought dead, appeared live on international broadcast. She named names, spoke of containers and coercion, bribes and disappearances. Within hours, protest movements sparked across multiple cities. Anonymous tips flooded law enforcement lines. In the study, Nicholas stared at the screen, watching the world change one name at a time. Elena, now stronger, stood beside him. She reached for his hand. We did it, she said. No, Nicholas whispered. We started it. Outside, reporters gathered at the estate's gates. But inside, in the quiet warmth of the den, Malia sat with a blanket on her lap, sketching again, faces, buildings, locations. Her eyes were sharp, her lines confident. "You don't have to keep doing this," Nicholas said softly. She looked up. "Yes, I do." He smiled. "Then we fight together." In the distance, beyond the estate and the screens and the headlines, a dark room flickered with light. A man watched the broadcast with cold eyes, then touched a phone to his ear. "She's alive," the voice on the other end said. The man replied, voice smooth and low, "So is the movement. It's time to change tactics." The line went dead. But in the Drayton estate, surrounded by truth and resistance, the fire no longer burned in fear. It burned in purpose. 3 days after Lyra's broadcast, the world trembled. Governments held emergency meetings. News anchors fumbled for words. The term Black Triangle exploded across networks, tagged in protests, headlines, and underground forums alike. The veil of silence had torn, and what lay beneath it was monstrous. But inside the Drayton estate, it wasn't peace that followed, it was pressure. Nicholas stood in the war room with Ree, the massive screen before them covered in real-time pings. Activity reports, encrypted chatter, panic. Ree tapped a blinking red alert. They're trying to burn what's left, files, identities, assets, vanishing overnight. "And Hale?" Nicholas asked. "No sign, it's like he dissolved." "Hale J. Whitmore," Elena said from behind them. She entered quietly, walking stronger now, her face still pale but eyes flint-sharp. "Former CIA, disappeared 5 years ago. He's the architect, the one pulling the strings." Ree brought up a dossier. "He shows up in surveillance once in 2017. After that, ghosts." "We flush him out," Nicholas said. Elena raised an eyebrow. "How?" Malia appeared at the doorway, holding a tablet in her hands. "You don't flush him, you flood him." They all turned to her. "Make him feel exposed," she said. "Make him paranoid, make him move. If he's smart, he's waiting for things to die down, but if we push harder, faster, he'll have to act." Nicholas gave a nod of approval. "We leak part of the files, not everything, just enough to provoke." Ree smirked. "Send the wolves his way." That night they launched what Elena called the pressure wave. Select intel from Lyra's drive, just enough to rattle cages but not enough to destroy leverage, was delivered to vetted journalists, international task forces, and public interest watchdogs. Fake charities, disguised shipping logs, government subcontractors funneling funds into shell corporations. By morning, 2 senior officials in Luxembourg had resigned. By afternoon, an arrest warrant was issued for the CEO of an offshore logistics firm. And by nightfall, the estate was broken into. It was subtle, almost invisible. A drawer moved, a paper out of place, a smudge on a keypad where none should be, but Nicholas saw it immediately. "Someone was here," he said, standing in the study, staring at the open cabinet. "No forced entry," reconfirmed. "Whoever did this had a code." Malia hovered nearby, arms folded tight. "They're watching us." "Yes," Nicholas said, "and that means they're scared." She didn't flinch. "Then we keep going." That night the house was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that felt like a held breath. Malia sat in the study, sketching again, this time not a person, but a symbol, the black triangle surrounded by broken chains. Nicholas watched her from across the room. "You've drawn that before," he said. She didn't look up. "In my head, since the first time I saw it, I didn't understand what it meant back then, I just knew it was dangerous." "What did you see, Malia, when you were little?" She set her pencil down, her voice flat. "Men with guns, a truck full of women. My school backed up against an abandoned industrial site. I used to stare through the fence. One day they came, loaded them in like boxes. I told my teacher. She told me I imagined it." Nicholas felt a chill ripple through his chest. "You've been marked for a long time." "Yeah," she said, "I just didn't know until now." The next morning, federal agents arrived. They met in a secured room beneath the courthouse in Washington, D.C. Nicholas, Elena, Ree, and Malia. Agent Calder, a wiry man with weary eyes, tapped a red file against the desk. Your evidence triggered congressional hearings. Dozens of people are under investigation, but Hale, still off-grid. His aliases are cold, his accounts frozen. He's not hiding, Nicholas said. He's preparing. Calder nodded. You're not wrong. The deeper we dig, the more it looks like he built this network to survive collapse. It's self-healing, decentralized. Some of the systems are still live, including one we've traced to a central node outside Phoenix. Ree pulled up the blueprint on his tablet. Looks like an underground records archive. Or so it's labeled, Calder said. In reality, it's the control center. Take it down, and the entire architecture folds. Nicholas studied the layout, long corridors, server banks, biometric locks. We take it out, fast. Calder leaned forward. This will be a war zone, and if you go in, you're not just disrupting data, you're exposing people who think they're untouchable. Nicholas nodded. Then we make them visible. Back at the estate, preparations began. Juno coordinated satellite scans. Elena liaised with media contacts to arrange real-time feeds. Malia spent hours cross-referencing logs, ports, and shipment routes. What are you looking for? Elena asked one night. Patterns, Malia said. They repeat things when they feel safe, and I think they're getting lazy. Elena smiled faintly. You're not just brave, you're brilliant. Malia didn't smile. I just pay attention, because no one ever did that for me. Ree briefed the team the night before the operation. 600 hours, we drop in 3 miles out. Ventilation shaft gives us access. Plant the transmitters, activate the live feed, and get out. No hero moves. Nicholas looked at Malia. You're not coming. Her eyes flared. Why not? Because you're the voice now, Elena said. If something happens to us, they'll come for you. You're the failsafe. Malia hated it, but she nodded. She understood. At sunrise, the team deployed. A chartered plane flew them to Arizona. SUV convoys took them through the desert to the drop zone. Sand swept over their boots like whispers. From the bluff, they saw it. The node, low, featureless, protected, disguised. Nicholas checked his comms. Everyone ready. Ready, Ree replied. We make noise tonight. They entered through the shaft. Ree disabled biometric locks while Juno scrambled camera loops. In the heart of the node, they found it, dozens of servers humming, hard drives blinking with life. Nicholas stepped forward, flash drive in hand. Let's kill the monster. Then a voice cut through the stillness. Well done, it said. They turned. A tall man stepped from the shadows. No gun, no guards, just confidence. Hail. I was wondering how long it would take you, he said, but you're early. Nicholas raised his weapon. Step away from the system. I'm unarmed, Hale replied, and I'm not here to stop you, I'm here to watch. Ree stepped in, gun drawn. This ends here. Hale didn't flinch. Do you really think collapsing a data network collapses power? Power doesn't die, it adapts, it waits. Nicholas stared at him. Then let's see if you're right. He pressed the transmitter. The screens flickered, then lit up with the truth. Faces, routes, payments, orders, victims, executives, secretaries of state. Every secret was now public. Hale's eyes didn't widen, he just sighed. You've lit a fire, Mr. Drayton. Let's see if it burns long enough. Then he turned and vanished through a hidden door before they could follow. Sirens blared. They retreated through the shaft. Back at the estate, Malia watched the live feed spread across every screen. And for the first time since she'd spoken those first words, your wife is still alive, the world believed her. The firestorm spread faster than any of them had expected. Within 12 hours of the Phoenix node's live exposure, networks went dark across Europe. Bank accounts froze. Ships in international waters were boarded. News anchors read names with shaking voices. their screens lit with charts of human trafficking syndicates disguised as logistics routes. No one could pretend anymore, not governments, not corporations, not the people. But inside the Drayton estate, no one celebrated. Not yet. Nicholas stood at the center of the command room, watching data flood the secure servers. Elena was beside him, one hand braced against the table, the other holding a printout of intercepted emails. Ree paced nearby, firearm at his hip, scanning every alert with eyes that didn't blink. Malia entered quietly, clutching a mug of tea, dark circles beneath her eyes. She'd slept barely an hour in the last 2 days. Her drawings, once personal, had become operational diagrams, routes, shifts in location, names, notes scribbled in the margins. She was no longer just a witness. She was now a strategist. "They're cornered," Elena said, scanning one of the latest logs. "They know it. The chatter's changed. They're moving fast but sloppily." "They won't go down without a fight," Ree muttered. "Cornered animals never do." Nicholas nodded slowly. "And they still have resources." Then Ree turned, his jaw tight. "We just intercepted something else." He tossed a printed photograph onto the table. It was Malia. Younger, 12 maybe, standing on a school playground. A red circle marked her body. Below it a line of typed text, "Clean the mistake." Everyone went still. Malia stared at the photo in silence. Her fingers didn't shake, her voice didn't crack. "They've known about me for years." Nicholas stepped closer, picking up the photo. "What did they mean, mistake?" Malia's voice was low, even. "I saw something when I was a kid, before Elena, a truck, women, armed men. My school backed up to an old chemical plant. I thought it was abandoned. It was." Elena looked horrified. "You tried to tell someone." "A teacher, she said I was confused, told me not to make up stories." Malia looked at Nicholas. "I wasn't supposed to remember. I wasn't supposed to survive long enough to matter, but I did, and now I'm the one thing they can't erase." Nicholas's grip on the photo tightened until the edges bent. Elena placed a hand gently on Malia's arm. "You're not alone anymore." Ree's voice interrupted. "We've got movement." He gestured toward the screen. "Chatter from one of Hale's suspected cells. They're planning a strike. Target this estate." "How soon?" Nicholas asked. "Hours, maybe less." "Let them come," Malia said. The room turned to her. Her eyes were cold steel. "They want to scare us back into silence. That's not happening." Within 30 minutes, the estate transformed. Steel shutters slid over windows, drones launched from the rooftop, tactical equipment came out of underground vaults, armed personnel from Nicholas's old security detail reinforced entry points. Nicholas briefed every team personally. "We don't let them get close. If they breach, we buy enough time to upload the final wave. No hesitation." Malia, meanwhile, trained with Ree. He handed her a training pistol and a disassembled sidearm. "Time to learn the tools." "I've never held a real one before," she said. "You've held more danger than most trained agents ever will." He taught her how to load, aim, disassemble, and hide. She learned fast. "You were made for this," he said quietly one night. She didn't look up. "I was made invisible, now I see them." That night, under the crescent moon, the alarm tripped. 3 silhouettes appeared on the perimeter, then 6, then 10. Nicholas watched them through the infrared. "They're not amateurs." Ree moved beside him. "They're here to end it. One shot, fast exit. Then we slow them down." He turned to Malia. "You know what to do." She nodded, jaw clenched. "Upload if we fall." The house went dark. Silence thickened like a noose, then it snapped. Glass shattered in the west wing. Gunfire popped like firecrackers. Screams cut short. Nicholas ducked into the study, firing twice into the hallway. Elena shoved Malia into a reinforced corridor, handed her a flash drive. "If we don't make it, get this out." Malia clutched it to her chest. "Don't say that." Elena leaned in. You were the first light in all this. Don't let them extinguish it. Elsewhere, Ree moved like smoke, neutralizing intruders with clean precision. One was taken alive, restrained, cuffed, dragged into the security room. Nicholas stood over him, blood on his own shirt from a graze to his arm. "Who sent you?" The man smirked, even with a broken nose. "You think this ends with you?" "No," Nicholas said, "it ends with the world." Ree leaned in. "We recorded you, everything you just said. Now you're not a shadow anymore." In the control room, Malia's fingers moved fast, typing the final sequence. "Uploading now." Outside, sirens wailed. Police, federal reinforcements, activated by Ree's emergency protocols. The invaders fled. Some were caught, others disappeared into the dark. But inside, they stood. Battered, bruised, breathing, alive. Nicholas's shoulder bled through the gauze, but he didn't falter. Elena was pale but unbroken. Malia stood in the center of the study, drive in hand. They hadn't just survived. They had made history bleed. Miles away, in a shadowed boardroom lit only by a glowing table map, Hale watched the footage on loop. He didn't scream. He didn't panic. He smiled. Because the war wasn't over. But for the first time, it wasn't silent. 3 days after the assault on the Drayton estate, the world began to stir differently. The headlines had shifted from disbelief to demands. Congressional hearings were announced. International task forces were formed overnight. Government officials no longer held press conferences. They gave statements behind closed doors, faces drawn, voices tight. The phrase "Black Triangle" had entered global vocabulary, not as myth, as evidence. But inside the walls of the estate, the mood wasn't victory, it was vigilance. The western wing still smelled faintly of smoke. Part of the floor had been torn up to repair burst piping. Security had doubled. Surveillance feeds hummed in every room. And despite the temporary quiet, no one believed the war was over. Nicholas stood in the war room again, this time reviewing a fresh dossier dropped by an anonymous contact inside Homeland Security. He wore the exhaustion like a second skin. "They've infiltrated 3 agencies," he said, placing a finger on a line of redacted text. "They knew we'd go public, so they planted sabotage from within." Ree stood beside him, jaw flexing. "So they're not retreating, they're regrouping." "Exactly." On the other side of the house, Malia sat curled up in one of the armchairs in the reading room. Sunlight filtered through bulletproof glass, casting a muted warmth over her sketchpad. She wasn't drawing faces anymore. She was diagramming conversations, symbols, numbers, linkages between names from Elena's data and patterns she'd spotted in satellite imagery. Elena stepped in, watching her for a moment before saying, "You need rest." "I need to stay ahead," Malia replied, not looking up. Elena sat beside her. "There will always be another connection, another thread, but if you burn out, this whole thing starts to unravel." Malia's pencil paused mid-line. "They tried to erase me. I can't stop until I erase them first." Elena said nothing at first. Then she whispered, "That anger, that need to fix the broken parts of the world, that's what they fear most." At that moment, Nicholas appeared in the doorway. "We've been called to testify." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Congress?" He nodded. "They want it public." Elena, "Me, Malia." The girl looked up. "Me." "They want the world to see the girl who remembered what the world wanted to forget." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Malia said, "Okay, I'll do it." Nicholas stepped closer. "You're sure?" Her voice didn't waver. "They used my silence once, never again." The days leading up to the hearing were relentless. Attorneys prepared statements, re-vetted the venue's security to within an inch of its limits. Elena coordinated with journalists, ensuring that the broadcast wouldn't be cut or tampered with. Malia trained every day, not just in protection drills, but in speaking. Coaches helped her hold eye contact, regulate her breathing, ground herself under pressure. "You don't need to be perfect," one of them told her. You just need to be real." Malia didn't reply. She already knew. The night before they left, Nicholas found her sitting on the rooftop balcony, watching stars blink faintly through the city haze. "You nervous?" he asked. She shook her head, not for the hearing, for what happens after. He leaned on the railing beside her. "What do you mean?" "When I speak, they'll hear me, but when I'm done, what if they forget? What if it all fades like everything else?" Nicholas looked out over the dark, quiet horizon. "It will fade, that's what the world does, but someone somewhere will remember, and that's how change spreads." She looked up at him. "You really believe that?" He gave her a faint smile. "I believe in you." The next day, they arrived in D.C. The marble halls of the Capitol buzzed with tension. Reporters hovered like vultures. Protesters waved signs. Inside, rows of long wooden desks sat like battlements, and behind them, senators in expensive suits prepared to interrogate the truth. Malia sat between Nicholas and Elena, her posture straight, her eyes calm. The hearings began. Elena went first. She spoke with surgical precision, describing how she'd uncovered the shell companies, the encrypted ledgers, the medical testing that wasn't medical at all. How she had been abducted not because she was Nicholas Drayton's wife, but because she was a threat to people who profited from silence. Then Nicholas stepped forward. He presented the evidence, timeline of data leaks, confirmed orders, identities, financial trails, corporate espionage backed by private militias. The room shifted with every document he submitted. But when Malia's name was called, everything stopped. She approached the microphone slowly, adjusted the seat cushion, and folded her hands together. The chairman leaned forward. "Please state your name for the record." "Malia Lillian Owens." "How old are you, Malia?" 15. "And what would you like to tell us?" She took a breath, looked directly into the cameras. "I saw a woman dragged from the ocean. She was bleeding, screaming. There were men with guns. One had a fake arm. They shoved her into a van. I was 10. A beat of silence passed, like a lifetime. "I told a teacher. She told me to forget it, but I didn't." Another pause. "I didn't know who she was. I just knew no one else saw her but me, and someone had to remember." A senator asked, "Why speak up now?" Malia's voice never wavered. "Because I was tired of being invisible." The room went silent, not just quiet, hollow, reverent. And then outside the chamber, applause, a ripple, then a wave. The crowd gathered at the gates cheered, holding signs not just with slogans but with names. Names of missing people, names of journalists, names of daughters. A hashtag exploded across every social platform, #IQ. By nightfall, the committee issued an emergency order. Full investigation, oversight task force, legal protections for whistleblowers and survivors, but more than that, a precedent had been set. For the first time in legislative history, a 15-year-old black girl from nowhere had been given the floor, and the world listened. But elsewhere, far from Capitol Hill, a different meeting was taking place. Inside a lavish compound on the Mediterranean coast, Hale stood in front of a projection screen playing Malia's testimony. "She's dangerous," a voice said beside him. Hale didn't look away. "No, she's necessary." The woman frowned. "Then why are we not stopping her?" He took a long sip of scotch. "Because we're not playing checkers, we're playing centuries, and now." He turned to the window, watching the waves crash below. "Now we changed tactics." The hearing had made her a symbol. Malia Owens, the girl who remembered, the face of a new generation of whistleblowers, advocates, and survivors, but with the spotlight came shadows, and those shadows were watching. 2 weeks after her testimony, Malia sat on the edge of a hotel bed in New York City, scrolling through endless articles with her name in the headlines. Some called her brave, some called her a pawn. One conservative columnist outright claimed she was a paid actress. She locked the phone and tossed it aside. Elena watched her from the couch nearby. Don't read the comments. Malia didn't respond. Elena stood, walked over, and sat beside her. This is how they try to kill you now, through doubt. Malia kept her eyes fixed on the floor. It worked. I feel hollow. That's what being visible costs, but it's also how you earn your power. Nicholas entered just then, holding a secure tablet. We have a problem. He placed the device on the table and hit play. A grainy video began to roll. It was Malia, standing alone in what looked like a warehouse, speaking into a handheld recorder. I made it all up, the recording said. They told me to say it. They promised money, safety. They just wanted to destroy important people. The video ended. Malia stood slowly, heart pounding. That's not me. We know, Nicholas said. It's a deepfake, very advanced, military-grade manipulation. They're trying to dismantle your credibility. They're scared, Elena added. That's why they're desperate. Nicholas continued. It gets worse. Multiple news outlets are already circulating it. One of them is claiming you've been quietly removed from public view. Another says you're being investigated for perjury. Malia laughed bitterly. So now I'm a liar, a criminal, and apparently dead. Elena stepped forward, resting a hand on her shoulder. We fight this. We expose the fake. Malia turned to her. And what if they just make another, and another? What if they rewrite me completely? They can try, Nicholas said, but the world saw you, they heard you. Did they, she asked, her voice suddenly small, or did they just watch it happen and move on like they always do? Silence followed. Then Elena said quietly, you've already done more than most people do in a lifetime. You've changed the landscape. That's why they're coming for you like this. They're trying to rewrite the future because you're part of it now. Across the Atlantic, inside a brutalist government building deep in Bucharest, Hale studied a wall of monitors showing real-time global response metrics. An analyst approached. The deepfake has reached 17 million impressions, trending in 5 regions. Good, Hale said. Should we amplify it further? No, Hale replied. Let the doubt metastasize on its own. Plant a seed, walk away. Let them water it with their fear. And the girl? Hale leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. She's not the enemy, she's the spark. You don't snuff the spark, you redirect it. The analyst hesitated. Sir, I don't understand. Hale stood and walked to a screen displaying surveillance footage of Malia and Nicholas in New York. We let her believe she's winning, he said. Then we introduce the next chapter. At the estate, reactivated dormant protocols. We're officially in asymmetric warfare, he said, as Juno ran anti-surveillance checks through the mainframe. Disinformation, smear campaigns, digital ghosting, these are worse than bullets. You can dodge a bullet. You can't dodge doubt. Nicholas sat with Malia in the garden. She was quieter now, not broken, but beginning to retreat inward. He offered her a small book. It was leather-bound, worn at the corners. What's this? She asked. Elena, Nicholas said, her journal. She started it the year before she vanished. Malia opened to the first page. The truth isn't a weapon, it's a mirror. Some people break it. Some people refuse to look, but if you hold it long enough, it reflects the ones worth saving. She read the line again, then again. I don't want to be a symbol anymore, Malia said. Nicholas nodded. Then be something harder to kill, be the truth. The next day, Malia gave an impromptu interview. No script. No advisors. Just her. She sat across from an independent journalist in a small Brooklyn cafe. No security detail, no teleprompter. This is me, she said. No filters, no edits. The journalist leaned in. Do you know what you're doing right now? Malia smiled faintly, reminding people that I'm real. The interview streamed live, 23 million views in the first 6 hours. Commenters poured in from across the globe, not trolls, not bots, survivors, allies, kids from schools who had watched the hearings in classrooms. They called her a fighter, a light, a sister. The ICU hashtag returned, only this time it was paired with a new one, #still here. That night, Elena stood beside Malia on the rooftop again. "You found your own voice," she said. Malia looked at the skyline. "It found me." Nicholas joined them, holding another printout. "You'll want to see this." It was a blueprint, an encrypted version of a tech prototype Nicholas had once buried when he left the defense world. A decentralized communications system designed for crisis zones, now being resurrected and replicated. "They're stealing it?" Malia asked. Nicholas nodded. "They're adapting it to rebuild what we dismantled." "They always rebuild," Elena muttered. "But we're not who we were either," Nicholas replied. "We've rebuilt too." He looked at Malia. "The world sees you, they tried to erase you, you pushed back. That means the next part of this story is ours to write." She stepped forward, eyes focused, wind tugging at her hoodie. "Then let's write it in ink, they can't wash away." Snow fell over DC like silence, soft, steady, pretending nothing was wrong. But something was. In the days following Malia's viral interview, she became a lightning rod. Cable news tore her apart, praised her, then questioned her all over again. One anchor smiled into the camera and said, "It's inspiring, yes, but should we really be treating a 15-year-old like a national authority on global corruption?" Malia watched the clip from the backseat of a secure vehicle, jaw clenched, eyes hard. They love a hero until she stops being convenient. Nicholas, seated beside her, didn't reply. He knew she was right. Their vehicle pulled into the underground parking deck of a secure intelligence center. Today's meeting wasn't about testimony, it was about containment. Inside, an agent named Thorne met them. Mid-40s, razor-cut hair, soft voice, too polite. "Director wants to debrief the girl in private," Thorne said. Nicholas's expression didn't change. "That's not happening." Thorne smiled as if it were a misunderstanding. "It's standard protocol." "Not with her," Nicholas said. "Not anymore." Thorne's eyes narrowed. "You really think you can shield her forever?" Nicholas leaned forward slightly. "I'm not shielding her, I'm standing with her." They left the building 5 minutes later. In the car, Malia finally spoke. "He looked at me like I was a threat." "You are," Nicholas replied, "to every system that depended on you staying small." Back at the estate, Elena was on a secure line with a UN envoy who'd requested direct coordination with Malia. They want to feature her in a global forum. Geneva, live address. Malia walked in mid-call. "No." Elena covered the mic. "You sure?" "I don't want to be the face. I want to finish the mission." Elena lowered the phone. "They think the mission is you. Then they don't understand it at all." Ree entered with a folder. His face told them everything before he said a word. "We've been compromised." Nicholas stood immediately. "How?" "Internal, someone's feeding data, secure locations, movement logs." Malia's eyes narrowed. "A mole." Ree nodded grimly. "High level, possibly someone tied to the hearings. They knew we'd turn over key evidence to the Justice Subcommittee. Now that folder's missing." Nicholas paced. "Do we know who?" Ree placed the folder on the table. Photos, emails, flight logs. "And one name. Senator Lane Morrick." Elena looked stunned. "She sponsored the hearings." "Exactly," Ree said. "Perfect cover." Nicholas gritted his teeth. She watched Malia testify. Ree continued, "And the data suggests she was already in contact with Hale's financial arms 2 weeks before the hearing. Crypto transfers, private flights, secure shell exchanges." Malia stepped forward. "So she played both sides, used the truth to expose enough evil to distract us from the deeper rot. And now she's setting up a smokescreen," Elena added. Ree confirmed. "She's scheduled to give a private testimony next week, sealed from public record, likely to redirect blame and clean her hands." Nicholas looked at Malia. "What do you want to do?" She stared at the folder for a long time. I want to remind her I'm still here." They arrived at Senator Morrick's private residence under the cover of night, not with weapons, but with evidence. Nicholas and Malia entered through the front gate, unarmed, dressed like visitors, their bags scanned by a stunned aide who didn't quite know what to make of the teenage girl beside one of the world's most watched billionaires. Senator Morrick greeted them in a velvet robe, pretending surprise. "Well, this is unexpected," she said, motioning toward the sitting room. Nicholas handed her a single sheet of paper. She glanced at it, her eyes flicked once, no emotion. "What's this?" "A copy of the financial transfer you approved," Nicholas said, "through a dead logistics firm tied to a known trafficking partner of Hale Whitmore." Morrick exhaled lightly. "That's quite an accusation." "No," Malia said, stepping forward. "It's a fact." Morrick folded the paper calmly. "I admire your conviction, Ms. Owens, but this isn't a movie. In the real world, people make compromises. Do you think justice moves without grease?" "You didn't grease justice," Malia said. "You suffocated it." "Perspective," Morrick replied. "I gave your movement a spotlight. That's more than anyone else ever did." "You gave us a mirror," Malia corrected, "and then tried to crack it behind our backs." Morrick smiled, slow and bitter. "You think people care about the whole truth? They don't. They care about comfort, the illusion of action. You gave them a story to cry about, and now they want it to be over. You should have taken the deal, the book, the movie, the ribbon cuttings, but you didn't." Nicholas leaned in. "That's where you made the mistake. You thought this girl wanted fame, she wanted justice." Morrick's smile faded. "Then she'll be alone, that's how justice ends." Malia locked eyes with her. "I was alone before, I'm not anymore." They left without raising their voices, but the war had changed shape again. The betrayal wasn't just external now, it was within. Back at the estate, Elena worked through the night cross-referencing documents from Morrick's network. What she found was worse than they thought. She didn't just aid them, Elena said. She copied them. She was building her own network, using the exposure as a means to cut competitors. Nicholas leaned over the table. She planned to inherit the empire after Hale. Malia stood frozen. She was never afraid of the system. She wanted to be it. Ree returned with confirmation. Interpol issued a silent alert. Hale just surfaced in Tunisia. Private meeting. Encrypted chatter says he's closing something called Rebuild Protocol. "What's that?" Elena asked. "Unknown, but Morrick's name was tagged on 2 of the archived messages." Nicholas turned to Malia. "Whatever Rebuild Protocol is, it's the next phase." She stared at the screen, face unreadable. "Then we don't wait for it to start." Later that night, in a small room beneath the estate, Malia sat alone with Elena's journal again. She flipped to a page she hadn't read before. "They expect us to rise, scream, burn, but sometimes the quiet girls survive, and they teach others how to survive too." The door creaked. Nicholas entered. "We may have 1 shot left," he said. She nodded. "Then we make it count." A sandstorm whipped across the horizon as the convoy pushed through the outskirts of Tunis. Inside the armored vehicle, Nicholas checked the satellite feed for the 3rd time. Malia sat beside him, strapped in, her eyes focused on the screen in front of her, where the word Rebuild blinked in cold blue font. Behind them, Elena and Ree reviewed the op plan again. "This is the epicenter," Elena said, pointing to a circular compound on the digital map. "It's where Hale's meeting with representatives from the Morrick Shell network." Ree tapped the screen. "We breach here, south access. There's a server bank underground. That's where the data lives. The final logs, the blueprint for what they're calling Rebuild Protocol." "What is it?" Malia asked. Elena looked grim. "A failsafe. If we collapse the system, they don't lose, they just adapt. Rebuild Protocol is designed to redirect operations into new forms, using emerging tech, AI smuggling routes, deepfake passports. It's not just rebuilding the machine, it's making it untraceable." Nicholas leaned in. "This is their reset button." And if they push it, Elena added, everything we exposed becomes irrelevant. They'll evolve past the law. Ree nodded, then we don't let them push it. Malia stared at the compound map. We cut the wire before they flipped the switch. They arrived at the edge of the compound after nightfall. A city of steel and shadow. No guards in uniform, just silent men with earpieces, walking like predators. Cameras were hidden in lighting poles, motion trackers embedded in the sand. But Nicholas had prepared for this. Drones buzzed quietly overhead, jamming the compound's frequencies. 3 minutes before they notice, Ree said, let's move. They split into 2 teams. Nicholas and Malia headed for the server chamber. Elena and Ree moved toward the control office, where Hale was expected to be. Inside, the corridors felt like a mausoleum. Quiet, cold. Dead. Until it was. A flash, then footsteps. They ducked behind a crate as 2 men passed, speaking in clipped French. Malia pulled a small device from her pocket, her own creation, built in the lab with Juno's help. A signal mapper. It lit up red. Firewalls live, she whispered. Not for long, Nicholas replied. They reached the server room. It hummed like a heartbeat. Rows of black towers, red lights blinking. Nicholas found the mainframe, slotted a secure drive, and began extraction. Malia stood watch, but her eyes flicked toward one terminal left open. A live dashboard, data streams, maps, biometric logs. And a tab labeled Asset Profile MALIAOWNS. She stepped closer. The profile listed her name, age, movement history, speech patterns, but something else too. Her mother's name. Jacqueline Owens, deceased, died in a warehouse fire, suspected arson, never solved. Malia froze. She whispered, they were watching us before I even saw anything. Nicholas looked up. What is it? They targeted my mother, she said, voice raw. She reported something, didn't she? She knew. He stepped beside her, reading the file. She filed a missing persons report 6 months before your sighting. Woman, Eastern European, disappeared from a shelter. Police closed the case. Then the shelter burned. Malia's hands trembled. They didn't come after me because I saw something, she said. They came after me because she taught me to look. Nicholas placed a hand on her shoulder. She passed the torch. You lit the fire. The screen blinked green. Transfer complete. Let's move. Meanwhile, in the upper hall, Elena and Ree slipped into the control room. The door was open. Too open. Hale sat at the head of a long table, back turned, watching a monitor display showing protest footage from London. He didn't look up. You're late, he said. Elena raised her gun. Don't move. Hale didn't flinch. You think this ends in gunfire? Ree moved to the terminal, pulling a flash drive from his jacket. You came here to stop me, Hale said, but you're not even on the field anymore. The game changed the minute the world turned you into martyrs. Elena's jaw tightened. We didn't come to be symbols. We came to finish this. Ah, Hale turned slowly. Then you're going to want to see what Marek's already done. He tapped a key. A screen lit up behind him, rows of faces. Politicians, media figures, activists. Many of them had publicly supported Malia. Now all marked, compromised. Ree stepped closer. What is this? A counter-narrative, Hale replied. One you can't kill with a broadcast. These aren't just people, they're new vessels. We've planted mistrust in all of them. One click, and they're enemies of the state. Your coalition fractures. The girl becomes a question mark. Elena's voice dropped. You're trying to erase her without touching her. She'll disappear into controversy, Hale said, almost with reverence. She'll be blamed for what comes next. What is next? Ree asked. Hale smiled. Rebuild, but faster, smarter, self-healing, no names, no faces, just need, and need doesn't go away. Elena fired. Not at him, at the console. Sparks erupted, screens went black. Hale's calm expression cracked, just barely. You can't stop it, he said. Ree stepped forward. Maybe not, but now it bleeds. Downstairs, Nicholas and Malia fought their way to the exit. Two guards blocked the stairwell. Malia ducked behind Nicholas as he fired, dropping one. The other rushed him, but she stepped out from cover, raising the taser Juno had taught her to use. One click. The man fell. Nicholas stared at her. You good? She nodded, breath shaking. Better. They burst through the exit, regrouping with Alina and Ree just as the backup team launched tear gas into the courtyard. A drone exploded overhead. They ducked into the convoy. Ree clutched the hard drive. We got everything. Malia held up the signal mapper. I planted the jammer. Rebuild protocol is locked out. Alina slumped against the seat. Then this really might be the end. But Malia looked out the window, eyes distant. No, she said softly, it's the beginning. Hours later, back at the estate, they reviewed the data. Names, transaction trails, full rebuild schematics. One document stood out, authored months ago by Hale himself. Subject line, Contingency Owens. Alina read it aloud. Should Owens continue to resist, discredit publicly. If failure persists, terminate. Silence. Nicholas looked at Malia. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She only said, then we make sure we finish it first. The final upload was never meant to be loud. No explosions, no press conferences, just code inserted quietly into the bloodstream of the internet like truth slipping past a sleeping guard. But Malia had other plans. At 4:17 a.m., inside the Drayton Estate's secure lab, she stood in front of the largest screen they had, her hands poised above the keys, eyes locked on a message she'd rewritten a dozen times. A manifesto. Not of revenge, not of rage. Of memory. Alina stood nearby, watching her. Are you sure? Malia nodded. They tried to delete us, so I'm going to overwrite them instead. Nicholas entered with a secure drive in hand. Final archives ready. Rebuild protocol files, Morrick's communications, Hale's contingency plans, every buried name, every buried voice. Ree followed close behind, holding a case with the last two transmission beacons. We beam it all to the satellite grid, peer-to-peer shadowing. No one can scrub it once it's out. This goes past the justice system, Alina warned. Once you hit send, it's permanent, and it becomes you. Malia looked up. It already was. The world woke up to a signal spike. Phones buzzed in cities and villages alike. Screens flickered. Networks slowed, then stabilized, not from malware, but from weight. A weight made of truth. Malia's voice played on every platform at once. My name is Malia Owens. I was never supposed to matter. I was never supposed to speak, but I did, and now you will too. The manifesto followed, then the files. Across the world, people read, watched, shared. Names once buried in sealed indictments were now trending. Maps of trafficking routes had interactive overlays. Court files, previously sealed, became public search indexes. More than exposure, it was education. Not just who was responsible, but how, and how to stop it. Hale watched it all unfold from a tower in the Swiss Alps, surrounded by 4 security monitors that now displayed only one word, BIACHED. He stood alone, hands behind his back. A voice behind him broke the silence. They outplayed you. It was Morrick. She stepped forward, calm, untouched by panic. So what now? Hale didn't blink. Now we go underground again. They'll follow us, she said. No, he replied. They'll tear each other apart. She gave them everything, and people don't want the whole truth. They'll fight over it, distrust it, turn on one another. But if they do, Morrick asked. He turned slowly. Then we disappear for good. At the estate, the aftermath began to unfold. Nicholas's phone rang non-stop. Lawmakers, journalists, survivors, attorneys. Elena's inbox flooded with speaking requests. Re had to triple the security firewall around their location. But Malia sat alone on the roof again. This time with a photo in her lap. Her mother, Jacqueline Owens, smiling in a garden, one hand holding Malia's infant fingers. The same expression she'd seen in the case file photo, taken years ago by people who never thought the image would resurface. Elena joined her quietly. "Do you think she'd be proud?" Malia asked. "She'd be in awe," Elena replied. Nicholas stepped out moments later. Interpol just confirmed it. Hale's properties are being seized. One of his private accounts was frozen mid-transfer. They're starting to fall. Malia didn't smile. "And what about the ones we'll never catch?" Nicholas took a deep breath. "Then we train others to see them sooner, earlier, louder." She nodded. "Then I want to teach." Elena blinked. "Teach?" "Workshops, digital literacy, pattern recognition, whistleblower protections. Start with the places that need it most, places like where I grew up." Nicholas looked at her with something close to reverence. "You're thinking bigger." "I always was," she said. "I just didn't know I was allowed." A week later, Malia stood in front of her old school. The one where she first spoke up. It looked smaller now. The fence where she'd first seen the unmarked van was still there, now with newer wiring. She stepped inside with Elena at her side, facing a room of students no older than she had been back then. One raised a hand. "Are you scared they'll come for you again?" Malia paused. "Yes, but I'm more scared of what happens if we stop talking." Another hand. "Do you think this will change the world?" She smiled gently. "I think it already has." Meanwhile, in a small studio in Nairobi, a teenager watched Malia's manifesto and began coding a tracking tool for missing girls. In an office in Stockholm, a burned-out journalist reopened a case she'd been told to bury. In a classroom in Sao Paulo, students debated the ethics of whistleblowing for the first time. And in a shipping yard in Indonesia, a trafficker looked up from his phone, his face pale, his name now public. Truth had a new name. Malia Owens. At night, back at the estate, Malia sat beside Elena and Nicholas beneath the stars. "I don't know what happens next," she said softly. "You don't need to," Elena replied. "You started something that can't be stopped." Nicholas added, "We just keep walking the line between what's broken and what's possible." She turned to them, a question forming. "Do you think the world will ever be safe?" Nicholas was quiet for a long time. Then no, but now it's seen, and seen things have a harder time hiding. Malia leaned back against the chair. Above them, the stars blinked like servers, sending signals across galaxies. And somewhere in the night, her mother's voice echoed, not in sound but in memory. "Look closely, then speak." Malia had. And the world would never unhear her again. 6 months later, the name Malia Owens was still echoing. Not in headlines, not in scandal, not in the spin cycle of a world desperate to forget, but in classrooms, policy drafts, survivor shelters, and international courtrooms where new laws bore her testimony in their footnotes. In a new wing of the Geneva Human Rights Center, engraved in glass just outside the entrance, "The truth isn't a weapon, it's a mirror." Malia Owens. She hadn't asked for the quote. She hadn't asked for any of it. That's what she told the press when she declined interviews, turned down book deals, and said no to being immortalized in biopics with actresses far older and far more glamorous than she'd ever be at 15. Instead, she built something. She called it The Thread. An open-source, encrypted knowledge network designed to detect, track, and expose systemic abuse, financial, criminal, or political. But it wasn't just code. It was a collective. Young engineers, journalists, artists, teachers, most were under 25, many were survivors. Nicholas helped fund the early infrastructure, but Malia turned down full oversight. "I need it to exist without me," she told him. "If it came from you, it'll always carry you," he replied. Still, she built it to disappear into the people who needed it most. And when people asked her if she felt safe, now, she always gave the same answer. "No, but I feel seen, and that's the first step." In early spring, Alina received an invitation. A private summit in Oslo. Humanitarian leaders, former whistleblowers, high-risk journalists, members of Interpol and the ICC, they called it the Quiet Uprising. They asked her to speak, but she declined. And instead, she sent Malia. The conference was held in a cold auditorium beneath the Nordic light. No cameras, no live stream, just people and paper and conviction. Malia stood at the center of it. No stage, no spotlight, no security guards at her flanks. She held only a printed page and a single pen, and she spoke. "I'm not here to make anyone feel good," she said plainly. "I'm here because people are still disappearing." No one looked away. They're disappearing in paperwork, in sealed records, in cities and countries where silence pays more than truth. They disappear because someone profits, and the ones who try to be heard, they're called troublemakers, liars, or worse, heroes, as if that title makes them untouchable. She paused. "But none of us are, and we shouldn't be, because this isn't about lifting one of us, it's about lifting all of us, together." There was no applause. That wasn't the kind of meeting it was. But as she stepped down, someone passed her a folded note. It read, "You are not the only thread." And below it, a symbol, a triangle broken at the top, wrapped in 3 intersecting lines. A counter-network. A new ally. She didn't know. But she smiled. The thread was growing. Back in Washington, Senator Lane Morrick had vanished. Last seen on security footage outside a private airstrip in Malta. The case against her was open but stagnant. She'd erased years of travel records, disabled implants, bypassed every tracker known to the intelligence world. Alina watched the footage on repeat some nights. "Maybe we missed something," she muttered. "No," Ree said, "she just knew when to disappear." "Too well," Nicholas added, "which means someone helped her." They were standing in a repurposed control room deep beneath the rebuilt eastern wing of the estate. It was quieter these days, fewer alarms, fewer threats, but vigilance hadn't faded. "I still think about her," Alina said. "Malia?" Nicholas asked. "No, Morrick. What she could have been, she knew the system, she could have helped us rip it apart from the inside." Nicholas nodded, "But power doesn't share." A pause. Alina added, "Still, sometimes I wonder how close I came to becoming her." Nicholas looked at her sharply. "You never sold the truth." Alina gave a sad smile, "But I wanted to survive more than once, and that's how it starts." They stood in silence, not guilt, not fear, just reflection. Then Ree said, "Hale's trail is cold again, but I don't think he'll surface." The game's moved on. Nicholas agreed. He's not the danger anymore, the next ones won't wear his face. Malia received a package in the mail one morning. No return address. Inside, a flash drive and a note. "She was right to speak, you were right to finish it, this is the rest." Nicholas, Alina, and Ree sat with her as she loaded the drive. What they found wasn't tactical. It was personal. A folder of internal communications between Jacqueline Owens and an investigative network she'd tried to join years before she died. Code names, photo evidence, notes she'd written in the margins of leaked contracts. One note stood out. "If I disappear, teach her to look, teach her not to fear it." Malia's hands shook. Even then, she whispered, she was building something. Nicholas put a hand on her back. "You carried it farther than she ever dreamed." Malia didn't cry, she smiled. like someone who just recognized a song after years of forgetting the melody. Summer returned with sun and unrest. Protests reignited in several countries. A company once linked to the Black Triangle network attempted to relaunch under a new name, but the thread exposed them in 3 days. A tech firm offering AI border surveillance lost its government contract after whistleblowers used Melia's decryption method to leak their internal reports. Change was slow, but it was no longer deniable. And for the first time in a long time, no one asked Melia to smile for the cameras, or wave, or relive her trauma for clicks. Instead, she taught. In a classroom in Cleveland, Ohio, a girl raised her hand. "What made you keep going?" she asked. Melia considered it. "It wasn't hope," she said. "Hope's too soft." Another student leaned forward. "Then what was it?" Melia smiled. "Memory." She let that hang in the air. Because memory doesn't need permission. It just is. And once you remember the truth, it becomes your job to speak it. That night, under the stars, Melia returned to the garden behind the estate. She sat alone. No phone. No press. Just a notebook in her lap, and her mother's name written on the first page. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "We did it." Then she began to write, not about what happened, but about what comes next. You've heard the story, you've seen the names. Now ask yourself, what if it had been buried? What if Melia never spoke? What if Nicholas had stayed grieving? What if silence had been stronger than memory? These networks don't die in the light. They mutate, they evolve, they rebrand. They count on people being too tired, too distracted, too unsure to dig deeper. They rely on a world that only remembers what trends. They know the cycle moves fast, and truth has a short shelf life, unless someone holds it. That someone can be you. You don't need to be a billionaire, or a genius, or a survivor. You just need to listen. You just need to look again. You just need to believe someone, especially when it's easier not to. Use your voice, support those who speak, protect the ones who risk everything to expose the rot. And if you're part of the system, be brave enough to turn the mirror on yourself. Because silence didn't almost win this time, it did win for years. And the only reason it didn't win again is because one girl remembered. Now it's your turn. Don't look away, don't scroll past, don't let them erase what we just saw. Because there are still names missing, still girls waiting, still fires burning behind closed doors and locked files. You can stop the next rebuild. All it takes is one more voice. Start with yours.